My name is Kartika, and I am the Project Management Officer of the ASEAN-IPR. Before we begin today's discussion, please allow me to brief you on some house rules to ensure everybody's comfort in following the discussion. Today's discussion will be 1 hour and 30 minutes long. The event is simultaneously live streamed on the ASEAN-IPR YouTube channel. Please ensure that you have steady internet connection and the updated version of the Zoom software. During the presentation from the speakers, attendees in Zoom who wish to pose a question to one or both of the speakers may use the Q&A box in the Zoom function, while viewers on YouTube can write their question in the live chat box. Please follow the format of question as explained by the organizer. Please refrain from using the chat or message box, using the chat or a message box function on both platforms for personal or extensive discussions. We ask all participants to be polite and considerate in your messages. Thank you for respecting these house rules. I would now like to invite the Executive Director of the ASEAN-IPR, His Excellency, Ambassador I Gusti Agung Musaka Puja, to deliver his opening remarks. Executive Director, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kartika. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished resource person, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and friends. On behalf of the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, it is my privilege and pleasure to welcome you all to the initial session of the ASEAN-IPR discussion series 2021, Inter-Sectoral Discourse on Peace and Reconciliation in ASEAN. One of the Institute's main functions include disseminating knowledge on peace and conflict resolution. One of the tools to carry out such function is through the convening of seminars and/or workshops. And as we have lived in the COVID-19 pandemic for more than 1 year now, the ASEAN-IPR has adapted in implementing its functions by utilizing virtual platforms for the convening of these webinars. The discussion series in 2020, last year, received positive response from the ASEAN-IPR stakeholders. We were able to engage with several organizations and individuals that brought valuable knowledge and experience into the discourse on peace in the region and beyond, such as Center for Peace and Conflict Studies, Cambodia, Myanmar Institute for Peace and Security, Crisis Management Initiative, Finland, and the King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz International Center for Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue. It is with the same intention that this second cycle of webinars are convened with more interesting, actual, and current topic trends that will draw more stakeholders and build greater networks with institutions and individual experts from within and outside the region. Amongst the purposes of ASEAN, as stated in the ASEAN Charter, is to maintain and enhance peace, security, and stability, and further strengthen peace-oriented values in the region, as well as to ensure that the peoples and member states of ASEAN live in peace with the world at large in a just, democratic, and harmonious environment. For this reason, the ASEAN-IPR adopted the motto, forging and fostering peace. The ASEAN-IPR itself is also guided by the principles contained in the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, whereby the high contracting parties shared commitment and the collective responsibility in enhancing regional peace, security, and prosperity. None more so than now are these values put the test and are more relevant than ever. Since the entry into force of the ASEAN Charter and the implementations of the roadmaps for an ASEAN community, ASEAN has focused its community building on three pillars: peace, prosperity, people, or more known as the ASEAN Political Security Community, ASEAN Economic Community, and ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. It must be said, ASEAN is doing well in its efforts on enhancing a prosperous community and enhancing the quality of life of its people. While peace, it is a constant vigilant work that the region must safeguard. It is not something we should take for granted, for without peace, there is no prosperity and happiness of the people. It is with this in mind, the ASEAN-IPR continues its works in studying, collecting, propagating values and messages of peace, both from within ASEAN and from outside the world and the regions. Not outside the world, but outside the region. This is why the discussion series has become one of the ASEAN-IPR's flagship programs. Through these sessions, the Institute could disseminate information, network with like-minded organizations, continue discourses, and share best practices regarding peace, conflict resolutions, and reconciliations. Excellencies, distinguished speakers, and participants, in this regard, I would like to express my appreciation to all of our speakers for taking time to share as your first-hand experiences as well as your expertise. We supposedly have 3 panelists this afternoon. However, due to the COVID situations, we couldn't manage to have all those 3 at the last minute. However, we have 2 great speakers today. And I would like also to thank Her Excellency Ambassador Peng, GC members from Singapore, for moderating this first session on the ASEAN-IPR discussion series. Your contributions to this discussion would surely benefit the Institute in developing its research and capacity building tools, and on a wider scale, benefit the peoples of ASEAN as well. I would also like to convey our gratitude and appreciation to the Embassy of Ireland and the Embassy of Finland in Jakarta for their generous support of this year's discussions. And also I would like to happily inform you that the participants for this afternoon sessions and seminars is about 119 participants, and good number for this afternoon. Last and certainly not least, I would like to convey my ultimate appreciation to all participants of this discussion. We hope you will gain new knowledge from these discussions, not just the one we are organizing today, but also the other sessions we will be organizing in the coming months. Please use this opportunity to raise questions, share ideas and thoughts, and enrich the conversations on peace. Thank you for your attention. I wish you all good health and a pleasant discussion. Please stay safe. Bu Kartika, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director Puja. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to introduce our moderator this afternoon, Her Excellency, Ambassador Kok Lee Peng, Governing Council member of the ASEAN-IPR and the permanent representative of Singapore to ASEAN. Ambassador Kok is a career diplomat, joining the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Singapore in 1995. Prior to her current position, she has served as ambassador in Manila, the Philippines, from March 2015 to December 2018. Before her ambassadorial appointment, Ambassador Kok served as Director General in the ASEAN Directorate from 2012 to 2015. Her other overseas postings include the permanent mission of Singapore to the United Nations in New York, where she was Deputy Permanent Representative and Counselor from 2008 to 2012, and the Embassy of Singapore in Washington, D.C. as the First Secretary from 1999 to 2002. Ambassador Kok graduated with a Bachelor of Laws, second-class honors from the National University of Singapore in 1994. She obtained a Master's in Arts Political Science degree from Columbia University in 2006 on a Fulbright scholarship. Without further ado, Ambassador, I now hand over the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Kartika, and thank you also to Executive Director Puja, my good friend, for inviting me to moderate this first session of the IPR discussion series 2021. I'm greatly honored to have this opportunity, and as moderator, you are not here to listen to me speak. I will give the floor shortly to our speakers, but I would like to reinforce some house rules. I think that all these sessions benefit from a vigorous and robust discussion, but let's keep things polite and civil, and let's try to avoid heated rhetoric. And the more questions you can line up for me as moderator to throw at our two experts, the better. Okay, on this note, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the first speaker in our distinguished panel. Ms. Adelina Kamal is my dear friend. She has been the executive director of the ASEAN Coordinating Center for Humanitarian Assistance, or AHA Center, which is based in Jakarta, Indonesia. Adelina has been executive director for 2 terms, stretching 6 years. And in those 6 years, she has raised the profile of AHA Center tremendously. She has managed to bring in more partners, not just from partner countries, but also from partner agencies. And she's tireless in her work to bring humanitarian assistance and relief to ASEAN nationals, the whole region. I think that there are many people who are grateful to her and her staff for their very good work. On that note, Adelina, I will give the floor to you, and I look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Lee Peng, for the kind introduction, and thank you very much, ED of ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation and the team for inviting me, for having me in this webinar. It is really a pleasure for the AHA Center to contribute again to your discussion series. First of all, I'd like to request our IPR colleagues to show my presentation, because right now I'm connected to you via my cell phone. I have problem with the internet connection. So there you go. And I will request IPR colleagues to manage the presentation. Thank you. So today, the focus of my presentation will be on the linkage, exploring the linkage between humanitarian assistance and post-conflict peace building. But this will be from the perspective and from the experience of the AHA Center, the home of One ASEAN, One Response in responding to various disasters caused by natural hazards in the past 10 years. AHA Center was established in November 2011, almost 10 years ago, and we're going to celebrate our 10-year necessary. So really our presentation is going to really highlight our experience, but also explore the linkage between humanitarian assistance and post-conflict peace building. And eventually, perhaps, we can further explore potential collaboration between the AHA Center and the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation. For those of you who have not been visiting the AHA Center, we are located in the building of BNPB, or the Indonesian National Disaster Management Authority of Indonesia, in Jalan Pramuka. We occupy the whole 13th floor. Ambassador Peng has been there a number of times, actually. And what you see now on the screen is our EOC, Emergency Operations Center, and that's the heart of our center, the heart of our office, where we provide briefings on the situation update on the basically the situation affecting the ASEAN countries in the ASEAN region. Next, please. I'd like to bring you to 2 years ago when the AHA Center had this anniversary. And unlike many others, we didn't celebrate our anniversary by throwing a party, no, but rather by having a rethinking week. And we showed this picture to our governing board members from the ASEAN countries, as well as our partners, because at that time, 2 years ago, during our 8th-year anniversary, we were really in the transition process. In 2017, in particular, we were given task by the ASEAN countries to perform some assignments that are not within our core mandate. So then we thought, okay, it's good to have this rethinking, because we want to clarify within ourselves, and also we want to get the views and the inputs from the partners and the member states. So we use this traffic light to actually show what actually fall into our core mandate. And as mentioned in the 2 legally binding agreements that establish the AHA Center, namely the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response, our Bible, and the Agreement on the Establishment of AHA Center, our birth certificate, the focus of AHA Center has been and will always be on disaster management and emergency response, in particular disaster caused by natural hazard like tsunami, like floods, earthquake, volcanic eruptions, right? And that is because when AHA Center was established through that 2 legally binding agreements, we were established, right, with Indian Ocean tsunami in mind. You remember the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. And by that time, 2 years ago, during our 8th-year anniversary, our analysis actually indicated that the intent, right, of the ASEAN countries through that agreements, to those agreements, were actually matched with our current capacity and resources. But when it comes to these other assignments given to AHA Center that are decided on a case-by-case basis, and these are actually in terms of provision of humanitarian assistance in conflict setting, we realized that we have limited capacity and resources to respond. And that, the way I see it, the way we see it, that's kind of like natural, because again, the purpose of AHA Center in the beginning was to facilitate cooperation and coordination with Indian Ocean tsunami in mind. And some years ago, when those agreements were negotiated, what we all in ASEAN were very afraid of was to have another tsunami. And we have a lot of that now. So then we put them in the yellow in the yellow traffic light, because it's proceed, but with caution. It doesn't mean that we cannot provide assistance, but proceed with caution. We look at our capacity first, and then also our resources and whether we have that. During that period, and this is November 2000, it was November 2019, before COVID-19, we were already asking the questions actually, because we used to monitor, we are in the business of monitoring risk in the ASEAN region, right? And in particular risk caused by natural hazards. And we knew at that time that there's the possibility of pandemic, right? And then there could be actually possibilities of, can you click IFA? Sorry, I didn't realize. Can you click? Yes. Yeah, there's a possibility of pandemic. There's a possibility of another Fukushima happening in the ASEAN region, because we have those risks. So we also ask this question, and this go to the red traffic light. And from the discussion, the direction was that no go for this, because the health sector is taking the lead for pandemic, and when it comes to chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear explosion, this actually requires specific expertise. And therefore no go. But then, okay, why don't we start doing some kind of mapping within the ASEAN family? So this was November 2000, I think. Quite interesting, because this was just a few months before COVID. And then in 2020, when COVID happened, then the mapping changed a bit. Can you click again, Ifa? Yeah. So those in the Go Core mandate, right, still going to the green bucket. But then click again. Then, we discuss with our governing board, okay, I think with the COVID-19, we also need to extend help. Although the health sector is taking the lead, but our center could actually provide some support, utilizing the resources that we have, such as, we manage regional stockpiles in 3 locations, in Subang, Malaysia, in Philippines, and in Thailand. So why don't we utilize some of them, like family tents, generators, and all that, to support the COVID-19 response of the ASEAN countries. So while not taking the lead, right, unlike natural disasters, we are the lead. We are the operational coordination engine. The home of One ASEAN was is very clear. But when it comes to a pandemic, we're not taking the lead, but we could provide and provide support. So now, things that are not within our core mandate, but are requested to the AHA Center using the current availability of resources and technical capacity, go to the amber bucket. So it's less complicated. But really, when it comes to anything that is not in the green bucket, we have to consult with our governing board. For the green bucket, it's almost automatic. We know how to do things, when to do things, and so on and so forth. Everything is actually laid out. And our current capacity and resources match with the intent. Now, can we click? Yes. So click again. And click again. So I have used the bucket, and I have used the traffic light, and I used the batteries. So we also did this kind of a mapping, and the capacity assessment mapping and rethinking that we did during the period of 2019 and 2020 were really useful for us, even until now. Because then, we could prepare internally, given the growing amber bucket, right? And also help us to be agile, but also taking into account the risk of not being able to respond to those in the green bucket. Because we have to remember, if we're established for things in the green bucket, we have to do it very well. That is the reason for being of the AHA Center. But since there are other tasks and assignments given to us, not that we ask for the assignment, then we have to think how we can actually capacitate ourselves internally. So we side with this project, for example, some of the activities that we're doing after the approval from the governing board. We're having a project with Australia to strengthen AHA Center internal capabilities, assessing the gaps in the skills and expertise of AHA Center in terms of providing humanitarian assistance in conflict. We will also be doing stakeholders mapping, training, developing SOPs, because our SOPs that have been developed so far are really designed for responding to natural disasters. The security protocols, the protection for deploying our personnel and also member states personnel, determining the relief items, whether things need to change, in terms of our specification in the warehouses, also fine-tuning our response plans. So that's what we have done internally. And with regard to the other tasks, really to continue to see what actually can be done when the request comes to us, because when it comes to COVID-19, there must be something that we could do and we could offer from the AHA Center, and it's the fact that we have actually been approached by the member states to provide support utilizing the logistic and the resources that we have. But we really have to be very careful, because the last thing that we don't want to have is that those batteries actually go down, right? And therefore we keep reminding ourselves what can be done to make sure that the batteries are not going into the red, and we can fill it up, right? Knowing that, understanding that these are additional tasks, but we're not stretching to the point that we cannot respond anymore to those in the green bucket. Next slide, please. So I've shown you the traffic light, the buckets, and the batteries. Now I will show you my favorite slide. So now we are in 2021. We experienced this prolonged pandemic, and then also this recent situation in Myanmar. The mapping towards our 10-year anniversary of the AHA Center has definitely changed. We now have at least 3 major threats with major humanitarian consequences. And all of this, unfortunately, now is not in the past. It's now, they all collide, they all get mixed, like a glass of perfect dirty martini. Shaken, not stirred, by the way. So, look at the glass, everything mixed up. The color changed, basically, right? The situation changed, basically. So now let's look at let's look at each of these elements. They are actually different, right? Although they get mixed up right now. Disasters, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, ASEAN remains and will continue to be the home to the world-class disasters. So that green bucket will actually become a fatter and fatter because of the climate change. We have 650 million people. 49% of our population is exposed to tropical storms and 57% exposed to earthquake. And that is a lot of people. Our collective GDP or wealth in 2019 is 3.1 trillion US dollar, but our exposure to risk caused by natural hazard is 4 times larger than our collective GDP, 12.17 trillion. So disasters caused by natural hazard is $1 trillion issue. That green bucket, the price tag is $12.17 trillion. And the bad news is that is going to be more expensive in the future because of the climate change. 90% of our disasters, however, can be predicted. There are things like earthquake and tsunami cannot be predicted, difficult, but we actually know from history and from scientific research that it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. Triple disasters in Central Sulawesi, for example, actually already happened in the 1920s and 30s, and even some areas were named, to reflect the calamities back then. So interesting when comparing it to conflict or pandemic, however, we know when the relief stage of disaster is going to be over, or we know when it's going to transition into recovery, right? For Aceh and tsunami, Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004 affecting Aceh and Nias, the recovery took 4 years. Cyclone Aegis, ASEAN was there for 2 years. Central Sulawesi recovery still happening until now. But we know, we can see where the, the end of the tunnel, and we can even calculate the damage, right? And the loss and then also the cost to build back better. And we also know where the ground zero is, where the mass casualties are, the most areas affected. But when we look at the pandemic, it comes like a ghost, silent killer, no ground zero. Everywhere is ground zero, not localized, spread out like crazy, no finish line. Our front lines get exhausted, and it continues to drain our energy. And countries' capacities, and anyone responding to both disasters and COVID-19 simultaneously, there will be time when our energy exhausted. And not to mention the economic struggle. Now let's talk about conflict. Highly political, long-term game, marathon. Endurance is more important than speed. Never-ending events, up and down, cyclical, things will not get resolved easily. An average of humanitarian crisis, I was told, 9 years. And an average of refugee displaced, living in camps, 17 years. Very expensive. And humanitarian needs globally, as a result of conflict, are not fully funded. So resources is going to be an issue because it's protracted. However, unfortunately, humanitarian assistance is often used as a convenient tool, but it is a crude tool. It's raw. It's too raw. And any humanitarian assistance we cannot just rely on humanitarian assistance to resolve conflict because it's not going to address the underlying causes, right? It is actually saving life. That is and addressing the needs of the affected population. And then when it comes to conflict, protection is number one. And any intervention, we were told as humanitarians, any interventions by humanitarians should not make the situation worse, or this principle of do no harm. So it's much more complicated when it comes to providing humanitarian assistance in conflict situation. In conducting its assessment, unlike responding to natural disaster, of course we have to do this situation analysis and blah blah blah, but we also have to apply as humanitarians the conflict sensitive approach in all of the project cycles and every situation mapping. And in terms of facilitating humanitarian assistance, observance of the humanitarian principles are important and necessary and cannot be is non-negotiable for us. Why? Because these humanitarian principles are the one that will protect those on the ground. And we cannot pick and choose and just select, okay, out of the 4, we only choose 1 or 2. So these are the characteristics that I thought is important for, at least for the AHA Center, right? To understand the fundamentals across the disasters, COVID and pandemic, however, may be the same, maybe similar. Things like leadership, clear decision-making, coordination, collaboration, trust building, same across the board. Now, let's click the last slide. When the 3 threats collide, our job in AHA Center is to prepare for the worst. That is the role of a disaster manager, and for us to play around with all potential scenarios in front of us. We know that we now have the perfect dry martini, right? Everything now collides into one. So what are we going to do with it? We have actually now the disaster and pandemic combined. Not that we are responding to pandemic, well, in a way, but we do to some extent, as I mentioned, but we are already responding in the context of pandemic. And it's already difficult, as we experienced when we facilitated ASEAN collective response to floods in Vietnam and tropical storms in the Philippines. But we're lucky because the fundamentals were already built, right? We have very good relationship with the NDMO, the National Disaster Management Organization. We have built partnership with the UN and other local networks that allow us to actually facilitate ASEAN collective response in the midst of COVID-19. Now, let's click. And here come a new assignment. Please click the yellow ones that AHA Center has been asked by the ASEAN leaders to provide humanitarian assistance resulting from the conflict situation right now in Myanmar. And that is conflict plus, we have to provide that in the midst of a pandemic, we have to provide humanitarian response within COVID-19 context. And AHA Center will need to operationalize this point for out of the 5-point consensus of the ASEAN leaders meeting. So you can see our plate is actually very full. What we are afraid the most, however, when another cyclone Nargis happen in Myanmar, we have actually 3 countries that we are watching the most: Indonesia, Philippines, and Myanmar. They have hosted the world-class disasters before, and they will be. It's a matter of time. And we have actually contingency plan for example, for Myanmar, when there is a tropical storm happening in cyclone areas. We have a contingency plan for Indonesia, we have a contingency plan for Philippines. But our contingency plan hasn't included, for example, when there is actually a conflict situation where we have to operate. We may have actually already obtained some experience with responding to in the midst of COVID in Philippines and Vietnam, but those 2 complexities, right? The conflict and the pandemic will actually make humanitarian assistance very difficult, not only for AHA Center, but also for other humanitarian partners. Now, please click one more. I think it's 2 more. Okay, so this is the picture of our, click again, on the ground coordination in Palu. And this is again, based on our experience, yeah? What does it take to make a regional collective response for disasters to work? And perhaps, some elements of it can be considered for preparing for a regional collective response for post-conflict peace building, yeah? But at least for disaster, these are the things that we think make it work, make the One ASEAN, One Response work. Clear policy decision. I've mentioned we have 2 legally binding agreements, the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management Emergency Response, the agreement on the establishment of AHA Center. AHA Center, it is very clear the leaders have made us as the operational engine and the primary regional coordinating agency for disaster management and emergency response. We have the SOP, right? And the decision making is very clear. How to actually negotiate for access, very clear. Who to contact, very clear. We have already established the network with the ASEAN countries. And AHA Center is a functioning, operational body that is functioning. We have responded to 36 disasters over the past 9.5 years. We have procedures of engagement, which is very important because procedure of engagement, our SOP, tell us how each part or element interact with one another, how member states work, how AHA Center works with the member state, how the military counterparts work with us and vice versa, how we work with the health counterparts, and how we work with the partners like the UN. We have interoperability playbook with the UN that has been tested as shown in the picture. Collective response plan unifies direction to go for parties. We know, the map. We have that in the form of contingency plan. And that provides practicability and basis for collective ASEAN response. We have common operating pictures. We produce situational update, over 4,400 we have produced so far, basically having the same level of information for effective coordination. And then resources, we have annual equal contribution from the ASEAN member states. Every country pays the same. We have 322 personnel of emergency response and assessment team ready to go, and many of them have been deployed. We have 3 regional stockpiles in Malaysia and Thailand and in Philippines have been deployed, not only sitting in the stockpile. AHA Center could offer the complete services, right?
Adelina.
Okay, one more slide.
Okay.
Sorry for that.
You read my mind. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
one or two more slides. I'll make it quick. Thank you very much, Ambassador. So next slide. So the question is, click. For disasters, the elements are clear, right? I grouped them. Okay, the red ones are the most important one and the most difficult, because this also require collaboration with the member state, clear policy decision, the agreement, policy mandate, resources that requires money, right? And operational capacity and readiness, the blue one, actually the easiest, because if we have the money, we can build the center that you want, and that's what you have right now, right? And I don't want to have it too prescriptive, because another center and another sector may be different. Therefore, I just group them into one block. But then when it comes to disasters, all these elements actually are aligned. The question is, if we are talking about collective regional response for other situations, are these elements available? Are they allowed? Are they aligned to allow for a collective regional response? So now let's click the last one. In the case of conflict, and again using the case of ASEAN, this is the last slide, Ambassador. When it comes to clear policy decision making, when it comes to mandate, we have been told that it's ad hoc, right? For us, it's not a green bucket, because AHA Center has no mandate to work on conflict, no mandate in conflict monitoring, in peace mediation, in post-conflict peace building, in conflict resolution. Not stated in any of our legally binding agreement, and we have to use the resources that are available, and it's been on a case-by-case basis. So the situation right now, the status quo is ad hoc, right? It's a short-term engagement. But it's very dependent again, on what we have, on available resources and capacity. Of course, we can always strengthen our operational capacity and readiness, which is actually the easiest to do, and we are doing it now. But it's not sustainable, It's not structured, not institutionalized, not sustainable, and it's going to be very heavy on the one that is actually tasked to do it. It's going to be very heavy because, and it also doesn't fit with the nature of conflict. Ad hoc doesn't fit with the nature of conflict, because the nature of conflict is normally protracted. We cannot apply ad hoc approach, on a marathon situation. Negotiating access cannot be ad hoc. It is continuing, and getting access should be done first, even before getting or having boots on the ground. So that is the current situation. And of course, in terms of the resources, the list, because we just have to put everything on that plate, right? And may not require ASEAN as a whole to set up a new structure. Of course, it's not ideal, but then what is interesting, and this is not coming from me, I have actually read it a lot, that there is this notion of integrated approach, and the proponents mostly are coming from external parties. Very tempting to put everything on one single agency and make it as an all crisis center. And as far as I know, even our sister organization in EU, doesn't respond to all crises, right? Perhaps to, natural disasters and conflict, but in all crises, they have to work together as in a coordinated manner. But for us, when it comes to integrated approach, there has to be a grand consensus first, right? To shift from ad hoc to institutionalized and integrated approach, to have all the things that I've shown, clarity basically on how we approach the situation. And also resources.
Adelina, sorry, to be fair to our next panelists and also to our audience, I'm sure they have a lot of questions for you now. And this has been a very engrossing presentation, but could you please wrap up in 1 minute? Thank you.
I can do 1 minute, Ambassador. I'm sorry again. So the last point is option number 3, which is actually quite interesting. And this is something that I would like to the audience, and especially the member state, to consider. Of course, it doesn't depend on me. It depends on the member state which options to use. But collaborative approach is not drastic merger. It's not acquisition. It's rather promoting collaboration and coordinations. we have all the same bosses, the ASEAN leaders, but we can work with a network of centers like AHA Center, IPR, the Arab Armang ASEAN Foundation, and basically bring, respective strengths to the table. And what needs to be done actually is a coordination and collaboration. But we need an orchestrator here, a grand orchestrator. So I'm thinking about SG as the ASEAN Humanitarian Assistant Coordinator, that perhaps the TOR can be reviewed further because he has actually already a role in the natural disasters and in pandemic. But I think it's a kind of like more realistic approach rather than the integrated approach. It will also allow us to apply the humanitarian development policy nexus. It can also be applied for ASEAN, not only internal collaboration, but also external collaboration with our partners, including the UN, including the Red Cross and humanitarian partners, that actually has been done before, this collaborative approach during the Central Sulawesi as well as Cyclone Nargis. So with that, I'd like to thank you. This basic collaborative approach is one ASEAN, one response. Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Adelina. Like I said, that was very engrossing. And I think for the benefit of our audience, you can see how the ASEAN regional approach to humanitarian assistance and disaster management has been. The AHA Center is one of our signal achievements in ASEAN. And because of its success, it has been asked to take on more jobs which are not necessarily within the core mandate, as Adelina has pointed out. And there's always a perpetual issue of resources. I think that many of our partners, some of whom are in our audience today, have been very generous in your support of the center. Thank you very much for that. And as you can see, from the list of projects that Adelina was setting out, there is a lot of work to be done, and we will need your support, your continued support. It was remiss of me not to mention our structure for today's discussion session. Well, the first presenter was supposed to have finished 15 minutes ago, and the second presenter at 3:45, but never mind. It's my fault. Okay, I will give the floor very shortly to our second presenter. He is Dr. Tomi Järvinen from Finland, and he will be giving us a extra regional perspective on the discussion topic. After Dr. Järvinen finishes his presentation, we're going to have a Q&A session that's supposed to go to 4:30, 16:30. Depending on how things go, I think we have a little bit of flexibility before we have an extended Q&A session, especially since we've overrun quite a bit. I do apologize for that, Dr. Järvinen. Thank you for your patience, and now the floor is yours for your presentation. We can't hear you, I think. No. Oh, help. I prefer.
Sorry, Dr. Järvinen, could we try refreshing your Zoom?
He typed he is not muted. Well, to the audience and to anyone who's following this discussion series, there has been a lot of internet connection issues today. So please bear with us for a short while more. Adelina, don't worry. I was really enjoying your presentation. Okay, we see Dr. Järvinen again. Can we try? No. Oops.
What about now?
Oh, yes, wonderful. Clear as bells.
Great.
Please go ahead.
Good. Thank you so much. And sorry, it might have been at my end. So I just reconnected my ear set. So maybe it's because of that. So Your Excellencies, thank you so much for inviting me and Finchurch Aid to have a session. And I'll try to be quite short on it and hopefully then have enough time for questions. And I'm happy to answer together with my colleague who has just presented, and also welcome everyone online, and happy to have you to listen to us and a very practical presentation. So we've heard about that great organizational setup that is regional and is clearly government authorized, government also directed response mechanism. But I'll take a very non-governmental organizational look at the post-conflict issues. And we've also heard a lot about natural disasters and conflicts and situations, humanitarian situations that are caused by natural events, natural disasters. But I'll focus a little bit on more like conflicts that are erased because of competition for natural resources, or then for that matter, simply armed conflicts and all of that. And then what role can NGO play in that that context, and how do we approach that as an NGO, Finchurch Aid? And just to say that our approach is based on human rights, and we have 3 core teams that we do programming in, and that is right to livelihoods, or right to decent livelihoods, right to quality education, and right to peace. And we see these teams coming together in all of the contexts that we are working in. The way we approach work is, of course, the humanitarian response, then the development side, advocacy side, and then finally in our toolbox we have investing into middle scale businesses, so that people would have dividends for peace and have a future that they can envision for themselves and for their families, and to ensure that we don't fall back into conflict. I think the word conflict was and peace were mentioned by the previous presenter a couple of times. And just to note that we see peace something that is not a stable state, and especially when we talk about FCA and the work that we are doing, we work in many fragile contexts and fragile states. Some of them very young, the youngest in South Sudan, Somalia, and the like. Or within a country, you might have an area where peace is not sort of like stabilized, and it can go between conflicts, back and forth between development and then coming back to a more humanitarian situation caused by armed conflict or sometimes even, of course, natural disasters. But we do see that our toolbox needs to be addressing all of these situations. And as we speak, we all understand that development is not linear. You sometimes take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back, or vice versa, 1 step forward and even 2 steps back, as the COVID situation has clearly proven to us again that this is the case. Sometimes something happens and it takes us back for years in terms of, for example, performance at school or school attendance and things like that. I was asked to talk about Nexus, and that was also mentioned already here. And usually when we talk about Nexus, we talk about transition from humanitarian aid to development. But now we are also adding in the professional discussion a 3rd element, and that is the peace element into that discussion, so that it's not only the nexus between the humanitarian action, development action, but peace that I would personally view as permeating the 2 situations, humanitarian and development situation. I want to emphasize that although we understand the need for defining these concepts, we have to say that the people that we work with, they don't think in terms of nexuses, humanitarian development. For them, life happens, and then you have to respond to that. And also we need to be very clear on that yes, we need to have plans in place. We need to have the authorities fully aware of what kind of conflicts are or possibly happen, and then how do we react, and what are our standard operation procedures. But in any disaster, it's always the local civil society, the friends, the people who live in those situations who do respond in one way or another, helping one another and all that. And if they have awareness of how to react into situations, then our efforts are more efficient. And that is a part of the way we think that we need to build local capacity and local authorities' capacity to work together when something happens, be it armed conflict or be it a natural disaster. I'll take a couple of quick examples. We could have many of them, but hopefully then in the subsequent questions session, I can answer and maybe take other examples to answer your questions and to illustrate what does this practically mean when we talk about Nexus. In Kenya, for example, in West Pokot, there is a constant rivalry towards who gets the natural resources, who can benefit and access from the resources that are available. And that has created, I would say, a cycle, even a history of conflicts between different communities competing for those natural resources, which is often at the core of armed conflicts and political conflicts around the world. What FCA has done is, first of all, we understand that it's only the local communities, the local authorities, the local corporates and businesses and societies that can solve their problems long term. So we don't try to bring in anything that is pre-modeled, but we bring together people, the parties of the conflict, those who are sharing the history of that cycle, if you please, of the conflict, to sit down and to discuss and to find out what you also said in the previous presentation, the root causes, not only the humanitarian situation, how do we solve that quickly, but what are the root causes? And in this case, it means that we bring, for example, women to talking cycles where they try to solve the problems, find local solutions. How do they influence their families, for example, because they play a major role in, of course, rearing the children, influencing attitudes, mindsets, and all that. So to have them on the table, and also to bring them on the table with authorities, because in that particular setting, it's always or many times it's the elders in the communities, and they are rarely women. And not even to mention that the youth, who many times are parties in the conflict, or even the ones who are in the front line fighting, if it goes to an armed conflict, they are not on the table. So we bring them to the table and have a discussion around it and find local solutions. One simple but very powerful solution that these communities have come up with has been a kind of an early warning system. And here we are not definitely talking about the nice operational center that we saw in the previous presentation, but really something you can imagine, a very rural, even nomadic setting. It's simply a chain of a calling tree. For mobile phones, those who have, and many of them, even in the remote context in Kenya, they have mobile phone access and network access. So we've come up together with the district authorities a calling tree, that when there is something, there is cattle wrestling, there has been something, an accident, or whatever small scale conflict is being brewed, there is a way to start alerting the communities around. And many a times with a simple phone call, calling together the elders, calling together the parties of the emerging conflict, if you want to say like that, is we have been able to prevent and save literally lives. And when we have learned this way of working together, now even through this COVID crisis, there is already a pattern. There is already a way of working and collaborating together, so that we've been able to distribute help to schools. We've been able to build on our experience and ensure, even if it's a very, I would say, low-key remote teaching via radios, via mobile smartphones, and sometimes if you have a proper stable access, even through internet teachings, while the COVID situation has been. So what are the key? The key is that NGOs, local communities, including women, including youth, and the authorities come together, and they have a common shared understanding that what happens in the community when there is a crisis that happens, be it natural disaster or armed conflict, or something is is going to happen. So how do we react to that? The second example, and I'll kind of then leave it at this and open it up for questions, since I understand we have about half an hour or so, and happy to add if time allows then more, is our approach in Uganda. Uganda is one of the biggest recipients of refugees, and we work with many of them, but I'll pick up the example from Rwamanja, Uganda, where you have mainly refugees from the Republic of Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. And they've been there quite a long time. And the reason why I chose this example is, again, that how different parties have a role to play in these conflicts, and how it needs a collaboration of civil society, government authorities, and the local businesses if we want to build a better future for the people we work with. What we offer in Rwamanja is vocational training, for the reason that many of our international partners, including UN, they have the mandate to ensure the primary education and to carry out, to ensure that everybody has an access to primary education. But then most of the persons who leave primary education don't have anything else to build on or to go forward to. And you can imagine yourself in a refugee situation, be it in a camp or similar situation, that if you don't have any path for your future, then what will happen? You will get frustrated, you will become easily a target to be excited into violent extremism. So we offer vocational training for these people in the refugee settlements, but also with the local community, to ensure that there is no conflict, so that the refugee communities would be seeing as benefiting from something that the local communities are not benefiting from. So we involve them in the same classroom, we involve the local businesses already in the training phase, so that they know the students, they have people that they can employ, and the refugees have then a way forward, something to look into the future, and at least a glimpse of hope. And also they built their self-esteem, not only being recipients of aid, but being able to meaningfully to contribute to this, to their situation. And to say this, that this is enabled by a very progressive Uganda government policy, that when the refugees are in the settlements, they have the right to work. They have permissions to work for a certain period of time, renewable if the situation prolongs, and they can contribute to the society, and they can contribute even to the Ugandan economy. So this way of integrating and giving hope to people has been proven very successful, and I would say ensuring that we don't collide back into the cycle of violence. And we have gone so far that we've been able to, of course, we want to build the local systems of recognizing degrees and recognizing that if you have a vocational training that you are certified of something, but sometimes it's not available for everybody. So we've been able to work together with Finnish educational authorities so that we've been able to offer Finnish degrees to refugees in Uganda. This is, of course, not something that we want to market as the solution, but simply to say that things are possible even in the direst situation. And then when the refugees go back to their countries of origin, they carry a skill with them, and they carry something that is recognized, so that they can go forward with the path of their education as well. So with this, I will end it here in the interest of time. Maybe just a final note that there was also a question that how do we work with the possible armed forces, or how do we ensure security in post-conflict situations? And I would answer that by starting from the same angle from where I started this short speech. Is that, first of all, we want to be in the community. We are present in the community. We've been in the country long enough, and we work with local NGOs. We work with local communities that are known to the authorities. So there rarely is that kind of a conflict that we are not trusted as an NGO, since we are embedded in the local communities, and we always inform the authorities around us, the international community and the local authorities, what are our plans. And it's about information, it's about trust building, that we don't just come in and go, but we have a long-term relationship with people and with the structures around. So in our case, we rarely have had any challenges in that. Of course, there are issues where you have to be very careful not to be seen as supporting one party or another, or things like that. But those sensitivities they can be solved if we want to solve them. And we have a couple of cases where either a UN peace mission, or then like African Union forces are actually even funding our work that supports maintaining of peace in the area. So maybe just as a principle, that when there is trust, when there is openness and transparency, then also collaboration will happen, and security issues of the aid workers can be guaranteed as well. So thank you for inviting, and I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Järvinen. I'll just call you Tomi, okay? That's the name of my favorite diplomat, Tomi Ko. All right. Again, another fascinating presentation from a perspective that's not in Southeast Asia, from a perspective of a non-governmental organization. I should add that Finn Church Aid is Finland, of course, and a large part of Dr. Järvinen's work has been focused on ensuring access to quality education in humanitarian and development contexts. Okay, I think that now it is time for us to do Q&A. I think we have some questions coming into the chat box. Thank you very much. Okay, I need to manipulate my chat box a bit. Okay, let's take turns directing questions to Adelina and to Tomi. So the first question for Adelina comes through the YouTube from Mr. Alistair Cook, and he is interested to hear more on how the ASEAN system will look like in the next 10 years when it comes to peace building in ASEAN. How would AHA Center feature in these efforts, if at all? Ibu Adelina are you there? Belum lagi. You're there. Okay. Did you hear the question?
Yes. Can you see me? Because I'm actually facing two screens right now, just to make sure that I have a
Okay, the screen you're looking at is the correct screen. Please go ahead with the question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alistair Cook, for the question. I cannot answer on behalf of ASEAN, but I can perhaps say a little bit about AHA Center. What's going to be in the next 10 years? Well, when it comes to disaster management itself, we still have plenty of things to do, right? We have, as you know, we have this great vision of ASEAN countries to become the global leader on disaster management, because we have been receiving assistance in the past decade, and it is time for us to actually share our experience responding to the disasters. So this vision to become global leader on disaster management is something that has yet to be fully fulfilled, and that actually is a big dream, a big vision that AHA Center needs to facilitate. So that's one that will continue to be in the next 5 years or even 10 years, the way I see it. And it's also kind of like for us to return the paper. Second, of course, one ASEAN, one response. We have yet to actually respond to those outside the region, facilitating collective ASEAN response. We have done it through knowledge exchange with 7 other regional organizations coming to AHA Center to learn about us. But when it comes to ASEAN collective response, we have not done it. So I just want to let you know that even for the green bucket, is still a lot of things to do for the AHA Center. And as you also know, our work program for 2021-2025, right? We actually have been tasked by the ASEAN countries to operationalize 80% out of the work program under the agreement, 80%. So that's a lot, yeah. We have to be able to be very good in the green bucket. That is a must, because that is the reason for being. If you ask me what's going to be in the next 10 years, when it comes to AHA Center role in peace and post-conflict peace building, I don't know. That will actually have to be the decision of the member states, really, the architecture and so on and so forth. But what I know and what I think we can do, at least from the AHA Center, I cannot speak on behalf of ASEAN. I'm not the Secretary General. I'm not the ambassador of Singapore to ASEAN. At least in the case of AHA Center, what we can do is to be agile. For AHA Center to be agile, if we're given this task, right, like COVID-19, what actually we can do. We are not the lead for peace and post-conflict building. We are not the lead for pandemic, but what can we do? And therefore, what I offer to you is collaborative approach. Because the issues are too big. Every one of us cannot do all these big issues ourselves. Climate change is another big thing. And that actually directly relates to us. So we have no choice but to do this collaborative approach. So in the case of post-conflict peace building, I think the same approach that one ASEAN, one response also needs to be done for post-conflict peace building. The way I see it, we need a coalition, and we can start with a network of ASEAN centers, with the Secretary General being the orchestrator, right? And then we work with the partners, the humanitarian partners, other partners that we have worked with, that we have trusted, and with that humanitarian coalition or coalition that we did in Cyclone Nargis, by the way, under the leadership of Singapore, George Yu, as well as former SG Dr. Surin Pitsuan, we can do far rather than just, us in ASEAN. We can do far with the partners behind us, because the issues are just too much, too complex, right, to handle. So that's what I offer, the way I say it, the more realistic approach that ASEAN and AHA Center should do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adelina. I think that the question can also be answered. Okay, I'm being a bit mischievous here as moderator, but speaking in my capacity as the Perm Rep of Singapore to ASEAN, ASEAN is arguably a peace building exercise. We were founded in 1967 after the founding countries just became independent. There had been quite a lot of turmoil and strife in the region, and the ethos of ASEAN is to stop fighting and work on development. And I think that our history, in our soon to be 54 years of history, ASEAN has done a pretty decent job of holding a peace in our region. I'd like to direct a question to Tomi. I was very taken by your case study of Uganda. And while you found a very good solution at the local level, focusing on educating refugees together with the local communities, giving them hope for the future, giving them a skill that they can bring back to their home country. But this rests upon, in your words, very progressive Uganda government policy. You know, how, in your experience, in my experience, progressive government policy doesn't often occur. Did you perhaps encourage the Uganda government to head in that direction, or were you just a fortunate actor in that particular stage? You know, how important is this factor, would you say, in building peace and strengthening the fragile state of peace in a post-conflict situation? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think an excellent questions. To be honest, we were lucky. It was not that we've been sort of advising to that direction. It's not our position, or even we've not been in those tables to discuss that. It's been a Uganda policy. And as said in the beginning, I think we are not here as an NGO to offer ready-made solutions, but to put ideas on the table to be discussed and to be, I would say, contextualized in a sense that I think what has happened is that there are communities in that area that have been in the cycle of violence, if you want to say it so, for years. And the government of Uganda has realized that unless miracles happen, that there is going to be continuity on this. So I think that has been in the background. I don't know how that process has gone, but what I can say is that we've been, for example, then we've invited and worked together with the government of Finland to learn from that, and we've been sort of hosting together with our government discussions around humanitarian situations over the world, where you, especially when there's a protracted crisis and when you lag in camps for years, we all know the dangers that creates, of course, to the individuals, but then also to the surrounding environment. We cannot say that everything is perfect there, but definitely, you know, as you mentioned, I've been in this field for more than 25 years. I started after the Rwandan refugee crisis, and I saw that if hundreds of thousands of people are deprived of normalcy in their lives, that creates huge problems that are going to escalate and explode at one point in time. So to me, as a humanitarian, I see that there are ingredients of success in this. But of course, I mean, the best is that you find a solution in the country of origin to find peace, and people want to go back. Of course, they feel attached to their countries and their places and their villages, and they need to have that right. So let's hope for that. But in the meanwhile, I think the international community should have all means available for maintaining a ray of hope in the horizon for refugees. And I have to mention digitalization in this. It's I think we've seen that even now, we as Finns, we have not been able to travel as all of us, but we've been able to, for example, engage Finnish teachers with Ugandan teachers online to have on-the-job training for them. And of course, we know that there are universities, there are high schools that are putting more and more materials online. There are problems in that approach, but if you have a crisis, then I would take any rope of hope into my hand that I can get and improve on that. So I also see that in the peace building side, digitalization is one ingredient in the future that we can utilize more to build rays of hope.
Thank you very much for that insight, Tomi. I'm going to ask you about resources afterwards. Okay. One question for Adelina now, from Apichai Sunchinda, independent expert and formerly with ASEAN Secretariat and ASEAN Foundation. An insider view. The comment or question is, can we envision that AHA and IPR perhaps joining hands to help address the multiple nexus issues related to disaster and conflict and peace building management in the region in the foreseeable future? Any concrete plans in this direction at the moment? And if so, what are they? And if not, how can it be further discussed and developed? Well, it just so happens that we have Adelina here, and we also have Pak Puja here. So I will I will invite both EDs to give their viewpoint on this. Why don't we go with the lady first? So Adelina, the floor is yours. Maybe 3 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you, Excellency. And with your permission, Puja. So the short answer is yes, definitely. And that's why I offer the collaborative approach. It's a network approach. And in fact, if we collaborate, then we will be able to apply the nexus of HDP, humanitarian, peace and development, and really make sure that conflict sensitivity approach is applied not only in the project cycles management, but also in the way we do things, the way we prepare, risk assessment, and so on, as I mentioned earlier. But for us, and I mentioned this to the former ED ambassador Reslan, for us to have this connection with IPR as well as the other centers, we have to be operational, right? Because we are operational coordinating agency. It cannot be just in the concept. So for example, when we talk about the Women Peace Registry, that's actually one avenue, right? Or any other registry, it has to be operational so that we can tap into the skills and expertise within your registry. And the network will have to consist of equally strong, sufficiently resourced, funded centers, so that, we don't actually struggle with one another, because each of us can bring comparative advantage. And this is just one IPR that we talk about. There's a potential for involving ASEAN Foundation for the development, right, angle, and perhaps the other. I think I heard there is a new center being set up in Thailand on SDG. I'm not sure about it, but of course the relevant division of the ASEAN also a possibility, as well as the partners. But with the IPR, potential to apply this HDP nexus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adelina. You came in on time. Very grateful for that. I was chuckling at some of your comments because, our ASEAN ecosystem of ASEAN centers, it's so disparate. Yes, there are clear synergies between some of our centers, but I think their designs and their resources, they range across a broad spectrum. And I was kind of wondering, but I think what is healthy and growing is that all the EDs are just, exercising the agency. They're going around talking to each other and, trying to think of ways, collaboration projects, etc. And maybe also in the process, they can discuss how best to use their limited resources. Okay. Pak Puja, are you ready for your 3 minutes? I hate to impose on you, but the opportunity is here and irresistible. The floor is yours, Pak Puja.
I will be very brief. It's good that Ibu Adelina took the floor first, and then I do not that much to add. I just want to say that that's like a Liverpool theme song. You will never walk alone, Ibu Adelina. So, of course, within our mandate, as this is one actually our mandate to assist the ASEAN's bodies in any circumstances with regard to the conflict resolutions and conflicts and peace building. So I believe we have the opportunity in the future to collaboration in even more robust circumstances. The second one, of course, Ibu Adelina mentions about OPER. This is one actually the institutions in our body which can be used in the future because we are exploring actually how women in particular can participate in the peace building and conflict resolutions. So I believe women can play a role and OPER can play a role in this respect. So we can make use of them in the future. So as mentioned on the cooperative advantage, I believe ASEAN in general should make use of all bodies within the ASEANs to work together and explore the possibility to work together in the future. But of course, ASEAN has a mantra, consensus. So we, of course, are governed by the member states in this respect. So we believe with the good faith and goodwill of the member states, we can work together. As I said that if you want to walk fast, you walk alone, but if you want to walk long, you walk together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Puja. So I hope that question has been answered in a very positive way, I must say. I see a comment from a Mr. Zakaria Rafi suggesting that ASEAN encourage AHA Center or other organizations to cooperate with local level organizations that are directly related, I suppose, to the natural disaster, such as the Medan City Children's Forum in coordination and collaboration. Well, I think that this is a fair comment, a fair point. It's difficult to deliver humanitarian assistance if you can't connect that last mile or the last 5 inches on the ground. And this is something that Tomi referred to as well in his case studies. I'd like to ask Tomi about resources. You heard Adelina talk about resources. For everyone's information, all ASEAN member states contribute a set amount to the AHA Center every year. The AHA Center is one of the rare centers that has such guaranteed funding. That's why I was chuckling earlier, because we do have a wide range of designs for our ASEAN centers through for historical reasons. But from a civil society CSO's perspective, what do you see as the main challenges in getting resources and not necessarily just funding? And how would you compare your field of work? You know, how's the situation there with what you know of the situation here? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think, again, a very good question. Two things. We do have some struggle in getting certain type of professionals for example, lawyers that sometimes you need, or accountants, finance people, because our salary scales might not be the most lucrative ones, although we try to maintain a decent level of salaries for our staff. Maybe if you allow me, I'll just give very shortly the example of how Finland works, and the government in the foreign policy has a place for the NGOs, and I think this is very I would say it's an exemplary collaboration between the government and the NGOs and the civil society. So, like in case of Finchurch Aid, the churches are encouraged to give a certain percentage of their budgets to us for foreign collaboration, whatever you want to call it. Then like approximately 1/4 of our income comes from public in Finland. Just anybody, the Finnish citizens, corporates, they donate funding for humanitarian and development work for us. And then we get, of course, government grants from Finland, but also with other governments. We work with EU, of course, ECHO, DevCo, USAID, and so forth. So a number of governments outside of Finland are funding our work currently. But having said that, we are even, I think, taking now first very baby steps, but in emerging economies like Kenya and Uganda, where we are thinking of how do we help them to fundraise for their own disasters and for their own development work. And I'm saying that in these countries, people are already contributing a lot, but it's unofficial. It's not through sort of regulated NGOs, and it's more like within the families, people that you know. But I do believe that there's also a room there to ensure that even in that way, that funding becomes sustainable in long run. And definitely there is, unfortunately, I can say, competition. And I don't say that it's always very helpful when we should more coordinate and make sure that whatever eggs we have, it's in the same basket and we do a good united effort. But this is the world that we live in a competition, and you have to live with that. Just an example, and if I remember the sums correctly, hopefully not, but you remember a few years back there was a terrorist attack in Kenya, in one of the malls in Nairobi, and the local Red Cross could mobilize to the tune of 1 million, if not more, US dollars overnight, SMS donations. So I think the resources are there when we communicate the cause and when we are reliable actors. And for that reason, we also need to then ensure that whatever NGOs we work with, like us, we do have standards. We do make sure that there is accountability on the funding we use. So it's a challenge, but I still believe in the goodness of humanity after 25 years.
We need more people like you around, Tomi. The world is beset with challenges, and we need people who can develop solutions, effective solutions. So more Tomis and more Adelinas. Okay, let's have a look at the chat box. Okay, I suppose this question is kind of, well, it's kind of a leading question. This comes from Ibu Arifah, who is the AWPR of Indonesia. She says, thank you so much for an engrossing presentation, Ibu Danila. Can you share some more what is AHA assessment so far regarding the possibility to bring humanitarian assistance to Myanmar during recent difficult situation, both because of the pandemic and the internal conflict? And another participant asked, how can we make an impact for victim, especially like in Myanmar? Okay, I think these are fair questions, but also to be fair to our panelists, there's a lot of thinking going on currently amongst ASEAN member states, as well as with our partner countries, on precisely the questions raised by our participants. So I would say that anything that our panelists wish to comment on would be their personal views at the moment, because discussions will need to take place between ASEAN member states and the AHA Center, which has been named in point 4 of the 5-point consensus. So normally we wouldn't want to prejudge the outcome of those discussions. So with all these caveats in place, I offer the floor to Adelina, to Tomi, if you want to take it. All right. Also, before one more thing, I think we're almost at 4:30, if not past. Oh, we're past 4:30. Sorry. So, shall we just take this as the last question of the session, because I don't see any more questions in the chat box. So, if the panelists are agreeable, or I'll give Tomi one more to be fair, to be balanced. Okay, Adelina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for mentioning that. I think it's necessary, as I mentioned. I think I've mentioned it earlier, that when it comes to humanitarian assistance in conflict situation, it's something that comes from the political sector, and most of the time coming from the ASEAN leaders. So AHA Center cannot separate ourselves from the political context and from the political decision, because it's, you know, the assignment actually that has come to us in the past and also coming to us now, actually coming from the political, the highest political leaders of ASEAN. So first of all, we have to work within the political context and political situation and political decision of the 10 ASEAN countries. That's number one. If there is a possibility, of course, there is a possibility. We have some response options that we have actually exercised in natural disasters, in disaster caused by conflict. But the details will need to be, are being discussed internally within the ASEAN structure. And because of the point number one that I've mentioned earlier, because, you know, it's unlike natural disasters where things are prescribed, and, you know, we have actually various experiences, and the SOP and is clear. Right? When it comes to when it comes to conflict, it's different. It's very different. And therefore, this kind of a political decision and political context will have to be carefully weigh in, and that actually goes in with the nexus, right? It cannot be just humanitarian assistance here. We have to also see the other angles in the triangle. In terms of humanitarian assistance, of course, the options, it can be a needs assessment, right? Well, before we deliver assistance, somebody has to assess first, right? It has to be based on needs. The details will be how we're going to do it, right? With whom, which organization that we have to work with, right? And so on and so forth. So I guess if we work in the humanitarian sector, I think it's pretty straightforward, right? It's a humanitarian it's a needs assessment, is facilitating humanitarian assistance, of course, but again, how to do it? Is it going just to deliver from our regional stockpiles, or actually facilitating coordination like we did in Cyclone Nargis, where we actually have a lot of people behind us? So there are various options that we have to be carefully considered. So second is facilitating humanitarian assistance. Number one, needs assessment, and better to do it jointly, as in the case of Cyclone Nargis. ASEAN did it jointly. It was one of the highest achievement ever when it comes to humanitarian assistance. Joint needs assessment, facilitating humanitarian assistance, and then also information management. Everybody requires this common operating picture, and that is non-political, right? And we need that information to be able to make that decision. So in these three aspects, at least, and these are non-political. These are the things needed by humanitarian actors to facilitate the humanitarian assistance. I cannot go into the detail because, you know, I will go more than 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adelina. I really appreciate your time discipline. Okay, Pak Puja, may I ask Tomi one more question just for parity, or do you want me to end the discussion here?
Please, Tomi.
Okay. Okay, I will ask Tomi one question. Tomi, what do you think? What are the factors that are required in order for an unstable conflict situation to move towards resolution and hopefully towards post-conflict? What do you think are the most important ingredients based on your experience on the ground? Or conversely, how can we tell when a situation is sliding into possible pre-conflict and then into outright conflict? What indicators do you think we should be alert to? Thank you.
Wow, if I have an answer to that question, then I'm a candidate for Nobel Peace Prize probably. I think it really depends on the situation, and once you learn the context, then you also learn to read the silent messages and signals that are coming there. Like in Somalia, we've been working for a number of years, South Sudan. So you learn to read the environment, and of course, people have a sense. And sometimes people react not based on facts or anything like that, but if they build up a sense of dissatisfaction and a lot of disinformation and all of that, then you need to intervene. And to such a complex question, I wouldn't have one single answer, but I think the answer to everything is more or less dialogue. There needs to be more understanding of the different parties, and then understanding one's perspective. And what I would like to say is, in our world, we need to understand that there are certain issues that, I mean, the right to protection, the right to help, the right to to be treated in a dignified manner. These are something that we cannot give up now. And to me, also, we need to be more sensitive about what technology is bringing to our line of work as well, both as opportunities, but then as possible dangers that might be there, and extremism in the internet online. That is something that we, for example, as an FCA, are taking very seriously, and our network for religious and traditional leaders is very active in Asia and all of that. So unfortunately, I cannot give you a very clear answer, but with those, I would say that there's always a way forward when there is a will, and we need to be sensitive to those signals and to those doors that are about to open, and then capitalize on them. Other than that, I really appreciate this discussion. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the organizers, and I hope that we can work together and collaborate also into the future. For me, it's been really a healthy learning experience as well, and having a very kind of working towards the same direction, but from different angles, and there are a lot of common ground in the future that we can harvest from. So, Your Excellencies and dear colleagues online, it's been a privilege, and thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Tomi. I just want to pick up on a couple of points. I know I gave you a terribly difficult question because, even I can't. I've been working throughout my life to try to find answers to that. But I do think that you made a couple of really important points. I think in our line of work, diplomacy as well as in your line of work, we need to be culturally sensitive. We need to really understand the cultural cues and the nuances of all situations that we're in. We need to communicate. We need to have more dialogue, as you say. It's when communication breaks down that misunderstandings arise, and they lead to bigger cycles of conflict, perhaps. And I think also we need to have a culture of respect. We will definitely disagree. I've yet to see humans, rapidly fall into agreement all the time. It's just not that kind of world. But we can disagree respectfully, and I think that is something that we need to work really hard on. And I'd like to applaud your work, bringing solutions at local level, working with post-conflict communities, giving them hope. I think it's really laudable, and I wish you all the best. I do think you should be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize at some point. Adelina, thank you very much for your impassioned contributions. I think that your job is not easy, but I think you've handled it with aplomb and finesse. So I really want to thank you for your continued advocacy and your continued outlook, your optimistic outlook, and always searching for a solution in collaboration with the existing resources. I'd also like to give a short thank you to the embassies of Ireland and Finland for supporting this discussion series. I'm very sure that starting from our beginning series today, which was lively and substantive, but not terribly structured because the moderator is a little rusty. I'm sorry. I'm sure that the discussion series will continue to be very interesting and bring many insights and perspectives to benefit us all. With that, I would like to hand over back to IPR. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Peng, for moderating this afternoon's discussion. We are very grateful, actually, to have you as our moderator. You did an excellent job, Ambassador. Thank you very much. We would also like to thank our two distinguished speakers for their time, for sharing their expertise and answering some of the tough questions posed by the audience. Thank you very much. But before we close, as in ASEAN tradition, I would like to request for a group photo. We invite the moderator, the two speakers, and the executive director of ASEAN-IPR. So if I may request for the four distinguished panelists to activate their camera, I will turn off mine. The secretariat will assist in taking in the picture. I'll give you another second or two to be ready. I will count down. 1, 2, 3. And one more, please. 1, 2, 3. And another last one, just to be safe. 1, 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much.
That was a way to get a smile.
Yes, not too serious.
Okay. Thank you very much to everybody. Ambassador, Mr. Järvinen, Ibu Adelina, all the best to you, and stay safe. And also to everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the first session of the ASEAN-IPR's discussion series 2021. We hope you have found the discussion interesting and useful. We apologize for the technical inconveniences during the discussion. We express our sincere appreciation to all attendees in Zoom and viewers on YouTube who have followed the discussion from beginning to end. You can review today's discussion on our ASEAN-IPR's YouTube channel. And if you have any follow-up questions, please send your question through the email as indicated in the message box. The ASEAN-IPR plans to have several more sessions with a variety of interesting themes and topics, so we hope you will be able to join our next session as well. In the meantime, we hope you will stay safe and healthy. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Kiitos, Tomi.
Kiitos.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
kasih ya, Pak.
Terima kasih, Bu
Sehat-sehat
Adelina.
selalu, Ika.
Terima
Dah.
kasih Mbak Adelina, terima kasih.
Sukses, Bu. Makasih Bu Kartika. Bagus
Terima
hari
kasih
ini.
Pak Idi.
Sorry,